Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, thanks for stopping by to check out the video. Today I'm going to take you through the process of making your own homemade grass and weed killer. And I'm going to show you the mixture and the ingredients that I use for my needs based on where I live. But I'm also going to expand on that a bit and talk about some of the different ratios of ingredients that you might want to use depending on where you live and what your specific needs are, soil conditions and things of that nature. So stick around and we'll get to it. Okay, so we're going to get started first by introducing what we actually are using to make our own DIY grass and weed killer. So the first primary ingredient is vinegar. Now this is not your typical household vinegar. I purchased this at, I think I got this at Lowe's. You can find it at Lowe's, Home Depot, an Ace Hardware, places like that. But this is 30% vinegar. So this is highly caustic, actually. Just as a comparison between this and the typical kind of vinegar you would buy for the household vinegar is typically about 5% acidity, whereas this is 30% acidity. So you have to take a few precautions when you're using vinegar that has acidity levels of this. There are actually some that are even higher acidity levels, but you don't need those for what we're doing here today. So that's the primary ingredient. The next ingredient is salt. Now, what I do, and this is a really economical way for me to be able to make my solution, is I just buy a big bag of pool salt. Now, I have a pool, but I don't have the kind of pool that uses salt. So this bag of salt lasts me a long time, because for each gallon, and I'll get more into detail about the amounts of these ingredients that we want to mix together, but a typical gallon of the solution that I mix will use about a cup and a half or so of salt. So that is the other ingredient. See if we can get that to stay right there. The other ingredient is just Dawn dishwashing detergent. And we use this in order to add in or to create the capability for the solution to actually stick to the plants. This, and it doesn't take much. For a gallon of water, it takes maybe a couple of tablespoons of this dishwashing detergent to make the solution sticky enough to be able to adhere to and cover the plants that you're actually spraying the solution to. So again, cheap, doesn't take much. And then finally, water. And I have a gallon of water here because that's what we're going to basically do, is starting with a gallon of water, we're going to mix this together and create our own solution. The last thing that I keep on hand is a 5-gallon bucket with a lid. This is just leftover from it's a leftover bucket from chlorine tablets that I use in a chlorinator on my pool. So I just hung on to the bucket. It actually has a locking lid, which is kind of nice. And I mix my solution in here, and then I have a lid to be able to cover that up with, and it's a great way to store it. I generally will make about 2 to 2.5 gallons of this at a time, but for purposes of this instructional video, we're just going to make a gallon, which is basically the amount that you would need for a pump sprayer. All right, so let's get started. All right, so we're going to go ahead and mix up a gallon of our mixture. Take the lid off of our big 5-gallon bucket here. We're going to, I've got a gallon of water measured out here. We're just going to dump that in. Just like that. Okay, so we've got our gallon of water mixed up here. I'm going to put up on the screen a chart that shows you the different mixing ratio, and all of this is based on how strong you want your mixture to be, and the strength really is tied to the acidity, because it's the acidity that's going to create the actual killing of the part of the plant, at least that you can see, what is known as surface burn. And there are basically 3 levels of strength that we can create. If you want to create something that has like 5% acidity, you would just use straight household vinegar. You could use that, but you would not mix that vinegar with water at all. You would literally use a gallon of vinegar, then add your salt, a couple of tablespoons of liquid detergent, and you're done. If you want a little bit stronger level of acidity, which I tend to, then let's say you want 10% acidity, then you would need about 5.5 cups of vinegar to a gallon of water. So we just put in our gallon of water, 5.5 cups of vinegar, add our salt, which is going to be basically 1 cup of salt. And all of these different ratios or different acidity strengths all use 1 cup of salt. And then finally, 15% acidity, which is what I use, actually calls for 8 cups of vinegar. And when I say 8 cups for the 15% acidity, I'm referring to using 30% vinegar. So keep that in mind. So we're going to go ahead and get started by adding our vinegar first. And before we do that, we actually want to use some eye protection and some gloves. So let me get some gloves here, and then we'll get going with this. Okay, so I have some gloves here, my eye protection, and we're going to go ahead and get started. I have just a 1 cup measuring device. We have our vinegar. So we're just going to start measuring this out. We're going to use 8 cups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In case you're wondering, 8 cups is a half a gallon. So makes it kind of easy. So now we have our vinegar placed in there. So now we're going to add 1 cup of salt. Now, pool salt works really well because it's meant to dissolve easily. If in Florida, where I'm at, there are a lot of pools that use a chlorine generator that requires salt. And literally, you just pour a bag of salt into your pool, it dissolves, and then there's a generator device in line with the circulation system on the pool that will generate chlorine based off the sodium that's in the water. I don't have that personally, but the salt that's used for that is really good for this. Now, what I bought is a little bit coarser, so it takes just a tad bit longer to dissolve, but still, nonetheless, it dissolves pretty quickly. I usually let it sit for a couple of hours, maybe give it a couple of stirs, that kind of thing, and then that will be fully dissolved. And then the last thing, just a couple of tablespoons of our Dawn liquid detergent. I'm just going to estimate this. 1, 2. And that is literally it. And we'll just mix this together. I have an old yardstick that I use. And I actually like to let this solution sit overnight before using it, just to make sure everything is fully dissolved and in that. So that is literally all we have to do. We'll set this aside. Now, using a vinegar salt solution for killing weeds and grass, it works really well. But how well it works is going to depend on a few different conditions. With me living in Florida, I live in an area where the soil is really sandy. So I have to kind of keep that in mind. The two main ingredients in this, which are the salt and the vinegar, the salt ultimately leaches into the ground, and after a few applications, that will actually go after the roots of the plant. The vinegar itself will not kill the roots, certainly not directly. What the vinegar will do is create surface burn on the plant. So it basically will kill the part of the plant that you can see. Now, doing that repeatedly is going to cause the plant to ultimately die down to the root level, just because of the lack of photosynthesis. So, but nonetheless, the vinegar will provide the surface burn and kill the visible part of the plant, and then the salt itself, after a few applications, will start to kill the root system. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with this kind of a solution is you don't want to go crazy with it, and you certainly don't want to use it in a planting bed as a way to specifically target weeds in and amongst other plants that you don't want to kill, because again, this stuff will leach into the soil and it will kill things that you don't want to kill if you use it in that fashion. So don't use it in planting beds. It's great for areas where you want zero vegetation growth, and I'm going to show you, we're going to actually apply this here in just a bit after it's had an opportunity to set and be thoroughly, and the salt get thoroughly dissolved. But I have some areas like around my pool equipment where I have creek rock, and I don't want any grass, any weeds, nothing growing around there. So it's an area where I want all the vegetation to just be dead and not grow. I also have along a fence line, I like to keep that treated. It just helps reduce the amount of time I have to spend trimming with an edge trimmer. And then I've got some creek rock along the outside portion of my pool cage, about a foot wide all the way around, that I also keep grass and weeds out of. And so it's an area where I want to be completely void of any weeds or grass. Driveways and sidewalks where you have cracks where grass may come up in those cracks, that's another great area to use it. But it's not the kind of solution that's going to fit every single need. The other thing is the type of soil. I mentioned that my soil is sandy. So as far as the effectiveness of the salt side of this solution, it leaches out of the ground pretty fast. So I have to apply it more often in order, if I'm trying to kill, I have to apply it more often in order to effectively go after the roots of the plant. If you have denser soil or compacted soil, that won't be the case. You won't have to apply it as often. Any soils that have like clay content in it, for instance, that would be your more denser soils. They will hold on to this for a longer period of time. Finally, it's important to understand that this solution, it kills all the microbes, all the good microbes that are in the ground wherever you apply this. So again, if it's an area where you think you want to kill the weeds now, but you may want to grow something later on, I wouldn't use this, because it's going to not permanently prevent things from growing in that space, but it will prevent things from growing there for quite some time after a prolonged period of use. What I really like about this more than anything is that it's basically people and pet safe, unlike some of the herbicides that are available. And I'm not going to mention names or anything, and that's all debatable, but I just don't like using those sorts of products because of the types of chemicals and things like that. Yes, you have to be careful, especially with the 30% vinegar. You don't want to get it in your eyes. You don't want to get it on your skin and hands, but just be careful when you're mixing it and spraying it, and you're good to go. But once it's there, then you don't have to worry about, or once it's dried, then you don't have to worry about it. Dogs and people can go out and they're not affected at all. So that works out really well. So Let's go ahead and again, I'll let this sit for a couple of hours, and then the next thing you'll see is I'm going to take you to an area around my pool equipment that I've intentionally let some weeds and grass grow into, so that I can give you a really good before view of an area that I'm going to treat. And we'll treat it with this solution, and then we'll come back the following morning and I'll show you the after. Okay, so we have our weed and grass killer mixture all ready to go. Have an old yardstick here. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a stir. And we'll go ahead and pour this right in our pump sprayer. All right, well, we've got just a tad bit left. That's okay. We'll go ahead and seal this up. All right, and we will take this around to where we're going to test. Okay, here's the area that we're going to test. It's I have this area where I have creek rock spread around my pool equipment, and normally this is weed free. I've intentionally let this get a little bit weedy, just so that I have something to really illustrate just how effective this grass and weed killer mixture is. So we're going to go ahead and get spraying, and then we'll come back the next morning and we'll see what we have. So I also have this fence line, and I think I'll go ahead and spray a little bit right along here, and just so that we can get a good before and after. So it's the next morning, and we're back here to this area where we sprayed our grass and weed killer mixture, and you can see that we've got pretty much everything is pretty much stunted. So I'll get you down here a little bit closer, and you can see the impact that this has had on these weeds. Again, some of the grass a little bit slower to react, but we actually have a really good reaction to our mixture, and this is what I expected. So pretty pleased with that. And we also did the fence line, so let me show you that as well. Okay, so here's our fence line, and you can see where we sprayed. Again, we have really good results there. One application, again, is not going to necessarily do it. You have to keep up with this. It's like any, especially here in Florida, we have such porous soil, and plant life grows at a prolific rate. So it takes more effort and more applications of grass and weed killer to control growth, like you see here, like whether it's along a fence line or wherever. But in any event, pretty pleased with that. Again, we got the results that we were hoping for. Okay, so there we go. You've seen the before and the after impact of using this DIY grass and weed killer. It works very well, actually. Again, you may need to change the ratios a little bit depending on how strong you want the grass and weed killer to be. So you can experiment with that a little bit. If you apply it and it's just like within a couple of hours things look dead, it's probably a bit on the strong side. You could dial back the amount of vinegar. The salt, a cup of salt per gallon of water, should work for just about any application. It's the vinegar that you might have to play with a little bit and get the ratio of that dialed in just a tad bit. But if you take those things into consideration, it will be a great way for you to take care of those weeds and grass in areas where you don't want those kinds of things growing. It's also pretty economical. I'm not going to suggest that it's substantially cheaper than using a synthetic grass and weed killer. It is cheaper, but I wouldn't say substantially, because the synthetic products They are a concentrate, and when you're mixing those, it's typically a small cup per gallon, so you get quite a bit of mileage out of that as well. But again, this is a safer option. It is a little bit cheaper, and it's definitely very effective, as you've seen. So hope that was a useful video for you. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. I greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. It's free, costs absolutely nothing, and I greatly appreciate it. It helps the channel out a lot. So with that, everybody have a great day, a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again on the next video.